So staying in the health, in like medical and healthcare thoughts.
Yeah.
One of the major, and I wrote this down so I could say it clearly, and to just save everybody time who's listening. One of the major bipartisan issues that's plaguing Americans is the healthcare system, which has become outrageously expensive, right?
Sure.
It's unaffordable. It's inaccessible by millions of Americans. We're overpaying hospitals and insurance companies that hide their prices.
Yes.
And they charge us whatever they want.
Yeah.
Patients overpay, workers overpay, companies overpay, the taxpayers overpay. On this podcast, Bernie Sanders came on and he stressed the need for a healthcare price transparency. Donald Trump did the same thing. He had an executive order.
Yeah.
I think it's still in place that demands price transparency. Mark Cuban stressed the need for healthcare price transparency. How do we not have real prices and transparency in healthcare, knowing that it's exactly what America needs so that our healthcare system will be honest and affordable and accessible?
Yeah. Well, you're right that we should have it. And the reason that we don't is unfortunately because there are a lot of powerful people who get rich off of keeping these things secret. And so they don't want transparency. They don't want sunshine.
You can say Chuck Schumer if you want. I won't say it.
Well, I mean, look, you're right, though. Like, obviously, Bernie and I are on the same team politically, but there are some healthcare things like price transparency where actually I think he and President Trump are both right that there's nothing that you go to Starbucks, right? You buy coffee. You know how much you're getting. You know how much it's costing you. You know, I remember when my wife, I think it was her second baby, where you know, you get like pain medications when you're delivering a baby, at least most people do, because it's like a very painful experience.
Yeah.
And there was some weird thing where the doctor that she chose was out of network and she didn't realize, I mean, you know, you're not checking whether the doctor's in network at the time, right? You just sort of choosing a doctor. And then we come home and we have like a $15,000 unexpected bill because she chose the wrong doctor an hour before she delivers a baby. And it's like, this is totally crazy. And we're in a situation where that was not a big deal for us. We were able to afford it. But think about like a normal middle-class family goes and has a baby and comes home to a medical bill that's like a fifth of their entire take-home pay that year, right? That's crazy.
Oh, the number one cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt.
Yeah. It's a huge problem, and I think the price transparency is a big part of it. But you asked, like, why hasn't it happened? It's because every time that we try to force price transparency, the service providers, the insurance companies, or the pharmaceutical companies don't actually want that transparency. Here's one of the reasons why the pharmaceutical companies don't want transparency. It's because if we realized how much more we were paying for pharmaceuticals over the Europeans, there would be a revolution in this country.
We pay a lot more than them?
We pay way more than them. And again, like my attitude is I am fine with people, you know, if you invent a life-saving cancer drug, I'm fine with people earning a great profit for doing something amazing like that. You want to motivate people to do it in the first place, right? And a lot of people are obviously motivated by that profit motive. But if you take certain drugs that are, you know, they cost $100 in the United States of America, and they're way, way cheaper in Europe. Or some of these really expensive multi-$1,000 cancer.
Bring something up for me.
Yeah. These really expensive like next generation cancer therapeutics, they cost way less in Europe.
Okay.
And
this says in 2022, U.S. prices across all drugs, brands, and generics were nearly 2.78 times as high as prices in the comparison countries. U.S. prices for brand drugs were at least 3.22 times as high as prices in the comparison countries, even after adjustments for estimated U.S. rebates. Wow. Does it show those countries? Is there a chart with that or no? I love a chart.
It's OECD countries, which is mainly Europe. Those are like the advanced economies, basically.
That's what that means?
The rich countries, basically.
OECD.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what?
So first world countries, probably?
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So Canada, probably Israel's in there. A lot of the European countries, I think, are all in OECD.
Okay. United
Japan.
States, Germany, Canada, Japan, Switzerland.
I can't see that.
Switzerland.
Terrible. Yeah, Switzerland.
Heard of that?
Yeah.
Comparable county average.
You're screwing with me.
Austria. Well, I think they misspelled it, dude. There's not that many zits in it. Australia, United Kingdom, and Sweden. Wow. So we pay per capita spending on prescription drugs in 2019, 900. And what does per capita mean?
Just per person.
Okay, per person.
Yeah.
$963 per person, whereas in Sweden, $270. United Kingdom, $273, dude.
Yeah. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's not fair, dude.
That's not
they
fair.
colonize everybody and they're paying cheaper for dope.
That's exactly right.
Unfair,
But again,
bro.
the reason we don't really know what we're paying here is because,
Because they hide it.
They hide it. They hide it. And they don't want to let people know, because if you let people know, then they would demand to pay less.
But
right? What something President Trump proposed, for example, which I think is a very good idea, is that he proposed re-importing drugs from Europe. Basically, if they're selling it in Sweden or wherever for $270 per person, and we're paying $963 per person, then we'll just buy it in Sweden and bring it in the United States.
I love that.
Right? That was a big thing. Of course, the pharmaceutical companies don't like that, but
And that's why that's why they tried to assassinate him twice, probably.
well, it's probably one of the things that could have happened. I of course have no idea, no inside knowledge. It's interesting though. That was maybe the first point. The oxy epidemic was sort of the first point where I started to question like the mainstream big pharma narrative a little bit. And I always ask myself, and I think this is something, like I'm Republican, I'm conservative, but one of the things that I think the old left was pretty smart about is like recognizing that, when money gets involved, when the profit motive gets involved in health, that can lead to good things, right? It can lead to people trying to cure cancer because they know they're going to make a lot of money if they cure cancer. I'm fine with that, right? But people making money if they cure cancer, that's a great thing. But then also sometimes it can lead to manipulation of the health system that doesn't actually benefit people's health, but does get people hooked on a lot of drugs that they wouldn't otherwise need. And this was something, again, the old left understood this, that like, well, you got to be careful. Like, are we prescribing this medication because it's good for people, because that's good, or are we prescribing it because some big pharmaceutical company is getting rich if we do, and they're putting pressure on the government or somebody else to encourage us to prescribe this medication?
Yeah.
And I think there are a whole host of ways in which, frankly, the old left was right about that. And, I've tried to persuade, modern conservatives that we should be more concerned about that issue. It's like, Bobby Kennedy makes this point all the time, right? Like, good. Some pharmaceuticals are good for us, but some actually it's not totally clear whether we're taking them just because it makes people money. And this is like, let me give you a concrete example, right? So, there's obviously this big like debate about transgender issues, and you don't have to wade into that. But what really worries me is when you've got pharmaceutical companies that are making billions of dollars on hormonal therapies for kids, and are we really being smart about whether this is good for the kids, about whether it causes long-term consequences? And why is nobody saying, well, wait a second, the people who are lobbying us to give these drugs to kids are also getting rich off of it. Right. And I worry about that. I mean, you
have to follow the money motive.
Yeah, man.
It definitely, of course they would want that, because it's just another way. It's like, well, how do we split the atom here again to make even more money off of somebody? Well, why not your gender? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're not using it.
Yep.
You're like, what do you mean I'm not using my gender? Like, I'm trying to. I'm still developing it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you're gonna but I agree. It's like a couple of my buddies secretly low-key date trans people, right? And I don't care if somebody's trans or Neapolitan or whatever. I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Hell, if I had a vagina, I probably wouldn't go looking for women, So there's probably some up to it. But what I'm talking about is shit, I don't know what I'm
Look,
talking
man,
about.
if you're an adult,
but look where the money,
follow the money.
At this
When we're talking
point,
about kids, follow the money.
Think about what's going on. Like, are the people pushing this, what is their real, or do they have some other motive? You have to think about that,
Well, that's why, like you mentioned Ozempic earlier, which, I've known a couple of friends who've taken it. I've never taken Ozempic or, any weight loss kind of drug.
Oh, it ended up having a black market. There was somebody selling it outside of a Vineyard Vines illegally or something over there outside of Charlottesville.
Outside of Vineyard Vines.
Breaks my heart.
That's the perfect encapsulation.
It breaks my heart, yeah.
Vineyard Vines selling
she was a
Ozempic.
Kappa Delta. Somebody said she was a Kappa Delta. I don't know if she was or not,
God.
But it's just that kind of stuff. It shakes me to my core,
God.
JD.
Oh, that's dark shit, man. That's
shakes
dark. That's
me
darker
to
than
my
a lot of what goes
core.
on in politics. A Kappa Delta selling Ozempic black market out of sight of Vineyard Vines. I'm gonna have nightmares.
They call it Fozempic.
But I like worry. Okay, so America has a terrible obesity problem. Okay, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling if your doctor tells you to take Ozempic, follow your doctor's advice, not what you're hearing from me on a podcast.
Thick, I don't mind it a little,
What I worry about is, okay, you create a problem and then you medicate to solve the problem instead of maybe solving the underlying problem, right? Like, why don't we try to understand why it is that we have a terrible obesity epidemic rather than just giving people another pill to pop?
Well, it's also we get used to that then after a while, and then it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
That's exactly right.
That's one of the tough.
That's exactly right.
And that's more of like a kind of a bigger look at that.